All right, guys, welcome back to the PAWCast. Today I have Molly in the studio. We're going to be talking a little bit about her job as a CVT and kind of her growth pattern. So here we go. Actually live on this, so I mean not like live, but
I was gonna say,
right, that scare you?
Yes.
That scare you?
I'm not prepared for that today. Like, heart just jump out of chest and be like, and we're done.
So that is definitely on the horizon. So when we did the thing with Carlo yesterday and like I actually streamed it onto Facebook, I was like, oh my God, I figured out how to do live streaming, and it looks good and it sounds good and everything worked. And so I believe that the plan is at the very least to start running these live in about a month. So one of the MSU students that's going to be here in May, and I have her slotted to be my first live one. Hi, Carlo. He's just on the floor interrupting. Sorry. No, you're good. You're good. So yeah, we're just sitting down and we just said, hey, it's Wednesday and Molly's here and she's got some time and
somewhat well rested.
Somewhat, as well as you can be,
yes.
Right? So we wanted to just take some time and just shoot the shit, basically. And we were deliberating a topic for about 30 seconds before this. And, as the podcast itself is kind of shifting more towards basically like a two-way engagement rather than just a one-way delivery of material. One thing that I kind of think would be helpful is to start to understand kind of the way that we utilize different people in different roles here at PAW. And you've been around for a very long time as a technician, not the entire duration of PAW, but as we kind of talked about last time, pretty much since the beginning. So really, like, let's just dive into it because I'm not a technician. So, if you were to explain to the layman like myself what your job is, especially being nighttime, how do you talk about what your job is to random people, and then we can kind of bump that up even further for those that are even potentially getting into the industry as well.
Easiest way to say my job is I pretty much start my shifts at 6 o'clock at night, and then basically it's anywhere from monitoring anesthesia for surgical patients, sedated procedures, clipping and cleaning wounds, filling medications, drawing blood, running lab work, looking at cytology. Basically anything that I can do in the clinic that I'm able to do within my degree, I can do it here.
Mm-hmm. Do you have like a favorite part? What's like favorite thing to do? Anything like that?
So I do love running anesthesia, but the kicker is it has to be like an extremely critical patient. Spay neuters, it's fine, I'll run them. It's kind of a walk in the park, but I do love it when it's like my brain just has to think on that one patient for like the next 4 hours. Perfectly fine. I love that aspect of it. And
that was kind of what we talked about last time too, with like you just being a little bit more attuned to like the emergency setting, right? So yeah, and luckily, as when you work nights, there's plenty of opportunity.
There's a lot.
Are there any notable situations, cases, things that you've had to do lately that are stand out within your role that would, maybe be of interest to people, a story that you would have, anything like that?
The one that stands out the most, it's not of recent, but it was one of a patient I had with Carlo conveniently back at the old clinic. The dog came in and they already knew that it had a splenic mass that ruptured. I believe it was about 2 to 3 days prior before even presenting to the clinic. They were traveling home to try to get it to its regular vet, and they stopped at our clinic. And then basically the dog came in, and it was Carlo, myself, and one of the old CVTs that no longer work with the company. Our brains were just focused on this one patient for about the next 4 hours, trying to get it stabilized, to get it into surgery. And then basically before we went into surgery, I just remember us looking at each other because we weren't talking about anything else. We weren't interacting about anything else. The only thing that was being said were things regarding to that patient. Once when it was stable enough for us to take it into surgery, I just looked at him. I'm like, I need about 10 minutes just to kind of go unwind and just take a moment for myself before going and stepping in to this surgical procedure on this patient that was somewhat stable before surgery as best as we could get it. We conveniently got it into surgery, which we didn't even think was going to make it off the surgical table. It did, and then the next 7 hours of my life then in the clinic was dedicated to this one patient to make sure it made it through the night. That's the most notable one because we actually didn't think that patient was going to survive with the amount of blood that it lost.
Yeah. Do you think that you are better, like, what's more interesting for you, like being able to dial in on a single case like that for an extended period of time, or the flip side of that of not necessarily being involved on one single case, but running the show, like from being essentially separated from actually like patient care, patient management? Do you have a preferred way that you like the things that you have to do, right? Like which one's better for you? Or are they kind of the same, but just in different ways?
That's where it becomes a little challenging. Nice thing is on the overnights, I kind of get that nice balance where it's like, one, I'm a control freak, so I love running the show because then I know always what's going on at every single aspect of a patient's care from when they start at the clinic to when they're discharged. But then I also love being one-on-one with a critical patient. So
Either
nice
way.
thing about the overnight shifts for me.
Yeah. Do you find that hard to balance that? Like because when you're, for those that aren't aware, we have they're not lead CVTs, but we have our technicians directing triage. And so what that typically is as we have cases come in, you're giving orders, you're taking direction from doctors and distributing out tasks, delegating, that sort of stuff. But when you're on that night shift and you've got, 4 of you that are here of various roles, there's, overlap essentially. How do you kind of balance that out? How does that kind of work for you?
It's a lot of communicating, whether I'm the one who's actually still running the show, delegating orders, communicating triage, or if I'm in a surgery, even if I'm not out there communicating triage, the staff that I'm working with that day, we all have a very well understanding of how important it is to actually communicate with me, even if I'm not standing up at the doctor's bar. There have been several times where it's been Carissa and Tiffany, and they've been on the floor, and I've been in an OR, and it's like, okay, guys, where are you at with this one? Where are you at with this one? And they can tell me where they're at and where they're heading to next. So having that level of communication is extremely important, especially if I can't be out there and be hands-on, because anesthetic patients, critical, or anything like that.
And then in that scenario, most of the time, like you're the person that has to be in there.
Yes.
It can't be necessarily handed off to somebody else. So yeah, I mean, if you were to, I guess, tell me a little bit more about nights, because those get wild, right? Like,
They do. Oh my God.
like why do you? I mean, I feel like a part of it is you thrive in that setting more so than what is it about that nights that pushes you that way? Is it the challenge? Is it the fact that to be honest, when there's less people, it's not that rules are looser, but you have to be a little bit more artistic in the way that they're applied, right? Yep. Versus when there's more people here, that sort of stuff, you can be a little bit more stringent on following protocol ABC in that order. And what is it about nights that really kind of gets you going?
I do always like to make the joke, I don't play well with others, which is why I enjoy
it's mostly a joke.
It's mostly a joke, yes. Which is why I like my overnight shifts. But I pretty much start my shift at 6 o'clock at night, and we start with our grand rounds. Every single hospitalized patient, we overnight doctor that comes in, myself, we then round with the doctor and the technician communicating triage so they can head off the floor or hand cases over to us. So it kind of starts there. And then it's either we come into the bar and there's a couple patients, or there's a shit ton of patients. And my doctor for the overnights is now making phone calls, and it's trying to get everyone to be on the same page, just try to get as many patients out as possible. Because when we look at the clock, and Sarai and Trevor know this very, very well, at 8 o'clock we lose somebody, and then at 10, and then at midnight, and then at 2 a.m. And if we still have a bar lined with 5 or 6 patients, and then 2 surgeries on top of that, we try to get them out as fast as we can. I do love overnights because it's a lot more hustle. than
just
else.
by nature
Yes.
of like, well, number one, like as soon as 4 o'clock hits, right? Like
4 or 5.
it starts to blow up every single day. It doesn't really matter.
Yep, always that rush at 6 o'clock at night too.
Yeah. So is that it though? Is it just the fact that it's like, you just don't have time to stop and think? Is that kind of the thing that gets you, or?
Yep, you don't have time to stop and think. You just pretty much go and you just watch everyone start communicating, and they just all start like everything falls in place, and you come in and see this bar full of all of these patients, and then next thing you know, you look and it's midnight, and it's like, oh, that went by really fast. Oh, hey, we only have 2 left. Like, yes, slightly easier night.
Yep. One of the things that we talked about on the last couple podcasts with Caroline with the grit and that was one of the questions on the scale was that how much do you believe that you're a hard worker? I guess for you, I would have ranked you like pretty much maxed out on that, because I don't know too many people that are more willing to put their nose down and just see a bar full of 15 patients and say, all right, we're going to get to that one that's all the way at the end, and we're just going to get there. Does that seem kind of right? Or like, how do you kind of like, what's your mindset when you see a bar full of patients like that?
Let's get them out of here. Like, and I don't mean that. I don't want to say that to make it seem like we're rushing through patient care. Yeah. It's just the aspect of we're starting to lose staff members throughout the night, and it's that expectation of let's get these patients out of here because, oh, hey, I have a pyometra or an exploratory that needs to be done, and then a spay or a neuter that needs to be done. So it's that aspect of, hey, we're going to work really, really hard for the next 6 hours and bust our butts, and then we may have time to bullshit around for about 30 minutes, or we're just going to keep going.
Yeah. How have you seen that kind of, like, how do you feel like you've grown in that? Because you've been on nights since the beginning of your career as a CVT. Was it what you expected at the beginning? And then how have you shifted, I guess? What have you focused on? I know we talked about communication before, but I guess that's more just in a general thing. What about in terms of like patient care, patient management, that sort of stuff?
So when I first started my overnight shifts here at the company, it was same kind of aspect. Yep, get hit with the patients especially when we opened at 6. Like, here's your rush, and then we would just get through them. And at midnight, you may have 1 or 2 patients. And then for the rest of the night, phones wouldn't ring. You wouldn't have patients walking in. You could just do your hospitalized stuff, focus on surgical instruments, do a surgery, clean a clinic, like very, I don't want to say easy, but
just mundane tasks.
Yes, very straightforward. And then as soon as we became 24 hours, you kind of watched that caseload where it went from mundane to, oh, now we're going to have patients throughout the night, and now we're going to have to get a surgery in, and now to where we're here, it's like, okay, on the triage bar, we take a piece of tape and we write it down in surgery, and any patients that come in after that, it's like, if you're stable, you got to wait, we got to get the surgery done. So we actually, before it was like, we'll put them on the table at this time. Now it's like, nope, now everyone else is waiting. This is hitting the table by 3 o'clock.
Yeah, and that's just a part of triage management, right? Which actually, when we were, I was talking to Annie yesterday or the day before, I don't remember exactly, but we were just kind of discussing, how we're handling this year, right? Because it's and from like January to today, and the triage system that we all live and breathe by basically is still less than a year old, which I think, like, to me, when I think about that, it feels like we've been wearing that pair of shoes forever, because we still had triage before. Like, everything has always been triage based.
It's come out of Carlo's brain and onto hexagons, which we did use at the old clinic, but the only big difference is now it's more communicating and more things moving around, so I have to step away. Anyone else can come in and they can pick up a hexagon and they can take over where I'm at and be able to still move efficiently through all of the tasks or fulfillments, everything that we need for our patients.
So I guess my curiosity is in the fact that you have that, right? Like, we can, not that we can exclusively operate off of the triage system running itself, because it can't, right?
It can't.
There has to be one person that is the receiver of data and also the distributor of task. But it also works pretty well if you're off and you've got 5 things lined up. It's like, hey, case 3, whatever that might be, needs fulfillment. Just keep going on it. Just get them through discharge, right?
Yep.
Like, we know that system developed a language. So my curiosity is, because I don't think you know what the numbers are actually at in terms of like patients that we've seen compared to last year for like January through March. How much busier do you think that we've been this year? And how, like, because like we've handled it pretty well overall.
There are some days where I'm like, oh yeah, we're a lot busier than we were last year. And then there are some days where it's like, after COVID kind of happened, we got slammed. So it's like, yeah, we're a little bit slower. It depends on the day. I always know when snow starts falling, we tend to slow down a little bit. It wasn't as bad as it was at the other clinic. Like there's
when it would just the brakes would just turn.
Stop and the phone doesn't ring and no one comes in, nothing, and it's just like okay, I'm gonna go shovel the 15 inches of snow we got now and spend the next 2 hours doing that.
So there we go. From January through March, so first quarter of 2021, we were 60% busier than we were last year. Now this was pre-move, right? Because we haven't it's been just 6 days less than a year that we've been in this building, but 60% in total patients, and it's not slowing down whatsoever. And if you were to tell that to any of us from like a pure numbers perspective, like it's a part of it, especially with how brutal last summer was. Like to me, the reaction is, well, that's frightening, because if we maintain that pace with how hard last summer was, how are we gonna survive? But the interesting part, and I know a part of it is having Lauren and Christina and Rhiannon all basically, they're a year deep now. They pretty much got their feet under them, that sort of stuff. We've got a couple new technicians. We've got students that are on their way here. We're over 50 employees. Like there's definitely more hands, but I think a bigger part of that, like, comfortability in seeing such a significant increase in caseload is just you just referred to. It's communication. Is there anything else that's kind of standing out to you in terms of like being able to just adjust ourselves to this massive influx of patients?
It's basically just communicating.
Yeah.
I mean, if the patients aren't going to slow down, they're going to keep coming, and being able to communicate with somebody, whether you just have to keep talking. If you stop talking, everything in the clinic just kind of halts, and you can see it happening. Someone always, whether it's myself or Carissa or Tiffany, whatever MSS is working, that it's like, hey, I need to go do this surgery. I need you to keep things moving here. They have to make sure they're also able to keep all of the lines of communication open, because if you stop, then everything stops, and it gets very clunky. Has
that been pretty much what you've been focused on in terms of growth in the last year or so, is just really getting those lines of communication open? Has there been anything like technical that you've been working on to help increase that efficiency, that sort of stuff, or has it pretty much all been working with the team?
It's been trying to get my communication to be a little bit more clear when it needs to be, like we said last time, coming off very, very blunt, direct. And then also trying to get them to be able to be more hands-on and be able, instead of having to pull me away from a bar to go do a blood draw, place an IV catheter, or to do something that I don't need to do, to be able to be like, hey, I need you to go do this so I can stay here. So it's trying to get them to develop more of technical skills than so I don't have to do as much.
Have you been teaching that sort of stuff as like maybe as the time allows, that sort of stuff, or how are you helping staff develop those skills?
It's teaching them the techniques that we all learn different ways. Everyone was taught different ways. When I was in school, I was taught one way how to do a blood draw, and then I came here, I could never get a blood draw out of a jugular vein. Carlo taught me a different way. Works every time. It's very easy, very simple. So it's trying to get them to figure out the technical skills that are involved with it, but then also helping them try to figure out what works best for them, whether it's the way another technician taught them or it's the way I taught them, just trying to help them develop those skills so they can be like, yeah, I can do this blood draw. It's fine. I got this. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And then what about like on the communication side, like, because I think a part of it, and we had talked about it last time, especially with working with like Hannah, who is very much not a very direct person naturally, but you can kind of see that she's just been more willing to say the stuff that's needed to be said as necessary, and we've got other staff that basically everybody that works here, besides you and Katie, doesn't have that level of decisiveness, especially in the way in which they communicate. Has that been another part of the way that you've been helping teach people in that communication and being able to work within triage, or has it been more focused on the what is happening and like being able to understand the fundamentals of the puzzle pieces within each case, or maybe a little bit of both?
It kind of goes, it's hand in hand.
Yeah.
Trying to get them when they're coming back to tell me something about a patient. A lot of the girls are, I don't want to say long-winded, but they do these long sentences and we're slammed, and it's like they come up to me and it's like I look at them and I'm like, this is going to be a long sentence. It's like less words, fast statements, like let's get to the point really quickly here.
Yeah.
And then at the same time trying to get them to understand the medicine behind why we're doing things that we're doing, so they understand. So when they have their next case that comes in similar, they're like, this is what's going on.
Do you do that? I guess why are, I mean, I can understand why they would be interested in understanding the medicine side of it, but what is your reasoning behind that? Like, why do you think that people want to know that stuff?
Makes it easier to help inform and educate caregivers. If they understand why a patient has X, Y, and Z going on with them, and then the caregiver asks them a question, as long as it's a question they feel comfortable asking, we don't have to pull a doctor back into a consult.
Yeah.
And then they can go to their next patient. Like if we can answer a question and we don't have to pull that doctor out or make them wait 20 minutes for them to get out of a consult, it's fantastic.
And what do those questions kind of amount to? And this is more or less like the role of a CBT, and that's a part of why understanding the maximization of that role. Like you're really referring to like what drug classes are and what they do, and then being able to deliver that knowledge to unlicensed staff, right? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yep, it's between teaching them about like diabetes, what each medication does, what side effects come with those medications. Because when we are talking with caregivers, doesn't happen too often. We do go over the list of side effects, and you'll have that one that they just nail you with that one question. And you're like, hold on, let me go ask. So trying to get them to be able to be like, nope, I know this answer. I can answer this. It's something I'm working with Carissa with. She had a caregiver ask, patient came in for diarrhea, doctor does a consult, sends it home with metronidazole. That's what they wanted. And then they call back 15 minutes later, like, hey, dog's still having diarrhea. And then it was, Carissa went to the doctor, asked the doctor about it, and it's like, but you know this answer. Like, you can tell them the answer. Like, you have to start the medications. You have to give them 24 up to 72 hours, depending on the patient. It's like, you know these answers. Like, just answer them. It's not out of your line for you to be able to say, yep, it's going to take a little bit of time.
I think a part of that too is like the comfortability line between case specific and then just like drug specific, right? Because I think that's what you're getting at with that one is like metronidazole takes X amount of time to start to work, right? Probably another example is like injectable Cerenia. Like, yeah, the rule of thumb, to my understanding, as closer to a caregiver than anything else, is if they get injectable Cerenia and they continue to vomit, not a great situation.
Not
right?
a great situation.
That would be clinical medicine at its finest. But then I learned somewhere along the lines in the last 2 years that, well, if it's within the first hour, there's still kind of that period, right? So I think that's kind of what you're getting at. But there's also the case-specific side. How do you feel like you handle the difference, or maybe have you grown in like basically pushing that line in like, I know more and more things, and when we get to the point of individually case-dependent, how has that process kind of gone? Does that kind of make sense, I guess, first? Because I'm having a hard time giving you the exact words, but... I'm having a thought with my mouth.
The brain just needs to catch up.
It's just catching up slowly. But like basically there's a tolerance level, right? For like, I now know that this question is not case dependent. And that is something that as you acquire more knowledge, that bar will move further and further and further along. Is that something that you feel like you've grown in, or that you're helping people grow in maybe? How much have you seen that kind of shift for yourself and others?
From when I started to where I am now, like I hated knowing the drug names and the side effects that came with them and how long it takes the medication to work. And now it's trying to take that knowledge that I have in my brain and trying to put it into words, as you said, and give it to other people so then they can start learning, like, I saw this in this case, and this one's similar with this one, but this one is 10 times different for them to start acknowledging how to link cases to cases and being able to educate caregivers from one aspect to the next, or being like, hey, this one isn't like this. What do you want me to do? To get them to become more comfortable in communicating their level of knowledge with caregivers as well.
So that was actually, that process is actually a pretty good example of the star chart confidence competence dynamic, right? Because if you're underconfident, you're going to move that bar really, really slow, no matter how competent you are. And if you're overcompetent or confident, but you're undercompetent, you're going to move it way too fast. You're going to give shitty advice, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like do you feel like you've balanced that well? Do you maybe find that you're pushing people one way or the other? Anything like that within those two variables?
It's always asking, are you comfortable to go over this?
Okay.
Because they're like, so-and-so has this question, and it's like, are you comfortable going over this? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Do you want me to explain it to them, and then you can listen? So it's trying to figure out their level of comfortability so we can move that bar at a good pace instead of just being like, hey, I'm going to throw you in the deep end. Good luck. Swim or sink or swim. Trying to help find out where their confidence level is to help them succeed.
How do you feel like is that something that you find that you're relatively natural at, and just being able to adapt to people's confidence levels, or is that something that you've had to learn over time?
I have definitely had to learn that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Were you more like the person that was like, there's the diving board?
Yes. Half the time it was go figure it out. Other times it was, I'm just going to throw you in the deep end. Good luck. Yeah. But now it comes down to, I'll answer their questions. If they come back with the same question multiple times, I turn and look at them and say, what do you think you should do? What do you think you're going to say? Because it's like, I know you know the answer. I've told it to you. Let's see if you can connect the dots and bring out that answer.
And that's actually, if you caught the last podcast with Caroline, she had kind of brought up a similar response where that's a coach response. So when there's definitely a part of coaching where you have to kind of over predict the needs of somebody that's in the process of creation, because as a mentor, that sort of stuff, you've seen it, right? So you can accelerate the learning path. However, there is a portion of it, like they're just going to have to live life, and as much as you want to make it faster, you're not going to make it a zero time frame. But that response of like, well, now that we've gone through this a couple times, you have to start to ask, well, what's missing? Like, tell me how I can help you, because I've helped you in every way that I know how up to this point. Now you have to start to ask me specific questions, and being able to prompt people to do that rather than just like, there's the other side of that would be a persecutor type reaction, that would actually be the other side, is saying, no, I've already answered this question for you. Now go figure it out. Like, I've already done as much as I can for you. There's the diving board. Bye. Good luck. I guess, with learning that is why? Like, why have you done that? I guess is my question. Why have you found that you've shifted more into that coach type role in those scenarios?
It was something actually Annie got me going on, because it was like, okay, like I've been here for how long? I wanted to start getting more into helping train, whether it's mentees coming in from NTC or other CBTs or other MSS. And it's like, what can I do to be better at helping them?
Yep.
So it was something Annie told me, and she's like, instead of doing it this way, she's like, after a while, just look at them and be like, what do you think you should do? What do you think the answer is? And see if we can pull it out of them that way. I use it on Hannah all of the time.
Yeah.
She hates it, but I do it.
But like, does she actually hate it? I would say that like there are times where it can be frustrating. Don't get me wrong, especially when you're just getting slammed. But there's so much value in that high pressure learning, right? Like. Yep. Like, I'm super stressed out, but I now know that, like, this is my highest priority item, regardless of the other 15 patients that are here. And if I can learn it now, that means I can apply it pretty much at any point within a high-pressure scenario. So there's a ton of value in that. But, like, I wouldn't say that she would be frustrated or irritated by it. It's just it's a part of maintaining a growth mindset, really. How do you, like, is that something that you focus on with them, and just being able to continuously improve that sort of stuff?
It depends on the staff member. Newer staff members, it's trying to get them to have the general gist of how to do their job. Now, Hannah, Carissa, Caitlin, the staff members that have been here longer and now are getting to the point where we can start going more in depth. It's like, okay, Hannah, like you ask this one question, like tell me the answer. And then it's like, and I'm just going to keep pulling and trying to get more and more answers out of you. So you start connecting the dots between this whole case.
Yeah.
And you can tell she gets frustrated about it. One, not because she doesn't want to learn, but because it's like she doesn't think she knows the answer, but she actually does. And part of like is trying to verbalize that to somebody else to make it seem like they know what's going on.
Do you see when you do that an increase in confidence thereafter?
Yes.
Is that why you do it?
It's why I do it. Not just to pick on them and have fun or torment them. It's because then they actually know what they're doing, and there is that increase in confidence level, and then they get more confident in their job.
Right.
And then they're communicating with caregivers more confidently too.
Yeah, that to me has been one of the things I was talking to Carlo a couple of weeks ago about that. Like, within the STAR chart, you've got confidence and competence and clarity and consistency, right? Like those 4 C's. Those are the variables of performance, the variables of potential. And the interesting part about that is when that originally got put together, those were there was kind of a dichotomy between them, because within competence, there's some stuff that like a coach or an administrator can do to help increase that. But most of the time, like an individual has to take the time to become more competent. You have to seek and fulfill the education process, right? But within confidence, there are certain things that can be done that I think are a little bit more natural to the environment that you're around. Within consistency and clarity, I cannot make you behave more consistently or do your job more consistently. Your hands are the hands that are performing the task. If you choose to do it differently every time, I can't control that except by basically exiting, right? But within clarity, ton of opportunity from a coach or an administrator's role to increase clarity with the team. But knowing methods to increase confidence is something that is, I would say that's one of the hardest things to do from an outsider trying to help someone else get more confident. I'm terrible at it. Like I the only thing, especially because I'm a super ridiculous extrovert, is like I just like telling people good job, and that's like that's the whole toolkit that I have. But for you, being able to fulfill, and actually Carlo's really good at it too, right? Is being able to facilitate more of that coach or mentor role rather than the leader role is something that I think is maybe a better way, but definitely a different way of instilling confidence. Is that something that like? Do you find that you've had to focus more on that rather than like consistency? Like between confidence and consistency, where do you think you've had to put more focus on with the people that, especially new staff, MSS that aren't certified, that sort of stuff, even with CSS and communicating that sort of stuff? Where have you had to put a little bit more of your focus?
Depends on it. Honestly, it depends on the staff member and how long they've been here. Yeah. If they're starting out new, it's more important for them to be consistent about, for example, how we talk to caregivers, how we handle situations, and then from there we can build and then go different directions. So it depends on the staff member and how long they've been here. Yeah.
Do you have a preference or one that you prefer to work on with other people?
Sometimes building their confidence, because it's fun. I'll use Hannah as another example. I'm gonna pick on her today.
Yes, absolutely.
So in the middle of the night when we really don't have very much going on, Hannah, who's going to become eligible to become a CBT here in the future, one of the things is going to be for her is becoming more confident in what she's doing and having that knowledge that she needs to take her VT&E. So one of the things we love doing in the middle of the night is sitting down and pulling out books, and we start drilling her on questions. And she always starts out thinking she doesn't know the answer. She's going to get them wrong. And then by the time we finish, because she's gotten so many right, that she's more confident about it, and then we can go back and ask her, and she's like, oh, I know this one. It's also a good refresher for me because a lot of it I have forgotten about.
Well, that's we've talked about that with the boards and all that sort of stuff with doctors too. It's like, you're going to fill your brain full of stuff, and then over time it's going to fall out. It's just the way that happens. But with working like on that level, and you have multiple roles here at PAW. Obviously, you're one of our technicians, and overnight technician I think is another worthy designation. But also, being a shelter engagement coordinator and having all of the responsibilities that go with that. But within that sort of working with one-to-one type engagements, that sort of stuff, is that something that you find to be one of the more fulfilling parts of your job? Or I guess like what keeps you coming back is probably the root of that question.
So when I first started, I really didn't like teaching people anything that was like, I didn't like teaching people, one, because as I joke, I don't play nice with others sometimes. Right. And then when I started developing more of my technician skill set, and was like, okay, I want more now. So I'm going to teach myself how to be able to teach everyone. I come back because, one, I love taking care of the patients. And then I love educating the caregivers as well and making sure all the patients get their care. But at the same time, I love teaching everybody now. My brain lost its thought.
It's okay.
That happens a lot.
It's okay. That totally happens. I'm just bringing up your assessment because I'm curious where you're at in terms of values as I'm doing multiple things here. So super high DC. We already talked about that. Yep. That's what I wanted to see.
There it is.
So economic is your leading a value, which we share that, by the way. That is also my highest. Actually, we're almost identical. Your individualistic is a little bit higher than mine. But one of the cool things about values is that when you share a value set with people, you start to speak the same language, or just naturally, because you're coming from the same place, even if you're saying things in a different way, or you're seeing different variables and discussing things differently. Like the purpose behind why you're talking about things is typically close, right? So for you and I, sharing economic, like I know what you're getting at with working with confidence is because you've seen the greatest return out of those that you work with in order to get to the point of serve the patient if you're able to go through that process. You didn't necessarily want to go there, but I think the thing that the calculation or equation that amounted to that for you was, how can I get to the point where the patients that are here are served the best? Is it through me? Is it through other people? Is it through communication with caregivers? Whatever that variable is, how do we accelerate the path to getting to serve the patient in the best way possible? And what you found is, even though it wasn't your quote unquote ideal to work with people and trying to help increase their confidence and through engaging their competence, that's one of the ways that you found to actually make that happen better. So it's not necessarily because you're altruistic and you're just trying to help people. You're actually low on altruism. I am also low on altruism. So if you have somebody that were to be here and not necessarily appreciate or engage that process, they would get shut out pretty fast. Like you wouldn't necessarily engage the improvement of confidence conversation with them very quickly, or you would give up on it as they would have already. Whereas a highly altruistic person would continue to push and try to get them to go forward. Does that sound about right, where that's really been kind of the direction?
I'm happy I was able to keep up with that very long-winded sentence. But
sorry,
yes.
I just love the high economic motivator because it's one of those things that I would say that a lot of people don't understand about themselves, and because we live in a culturally just outside of our practice and outside of the veterinary world, capitalism has kind of toiled with the concept of being economically motivated, and I think there's so much value in it in looking at it from an ROI, because I personally, don't get me wrong, I like to pay my bills, I like to have nice things, that sort of stuff, but I don't actually give a shit about that much money. Carlo and I have shared that since day one, where it's like money's a tool, it's not an asset. So being able to help people understand where that's coming from and why we engage people one way and we don't engage people that same way. It's like, so a lot of times it's about the return. How are you engaging that? And that's why you and I, especially when I started, would just BS for hours in the morning as I'm like trying to get the clinic ready. It's like, well, we're engaging each other and we're both improving, even though Molly's got no energy left anymore and I just woke up. I guess it is in terms of the concept of return on investment in the where you're spending your time. Have you known that to be something that motivates you, and kind of how have you seen that develop over time?
So I have had a couple people that I was trying to help teach and learn, and you can tell when they're willing to learn something.
Yeah.
As you said, they engage in the conversation, they ask questions, and you've had some people that they used to work here. I don't believe they're really here anymore. You can tell right off the bat just by trying to teach them something new. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I really don't want to have a conversation about this. Where now it's like the staff that you have here, if you have the time and you explain something, they start asking more and more and more questions, and then works out better that way. I love the aspect of teaching people. I love it when they start asking questions. It keeps me on my toes. But I can tell there are the people that work here, or have worked here, I should say, that don't ask the questions and don't want to know anything additional. It's just like, okay.
Right. And that's your reaction to it, right? Because like other people, just, they would say, oh, that person just doesn't know that they want to engage this. So I'm going to keep engaging them on it, and they're going to keep basically having deaf ears to it until the point that they don't. But like you talk about, like, I love teaching, that's the phrase that you use. So then my question is why? Like, why do you like teaching? Because I'm gonna work you down to understanding the point that I just berated you with over 5 minutes of talking. It's like, why do you like teaching?
It makes my job easier having more people that can do my job.
Okay, so why does it why does it matter that it makes your job easier?
I shouldn't say it makes my job easier.
Is it selfish? Because that's the statement that you just said, and I don't think that you're a very selfish person. It's
not selfish. It's something that was basically when I worked at Arby's, the general manager that trained me, it came down to her being like, you have this huge list of stuff you have to get done in a day, and if you can take this list and the more people that know how to do your job, it actually makes your job easier, because then you're more reliant on those people to help you out. It's something that for some reason she instilled into me that I just stick by. Like, hey, if you know how to do my job, it's one less thing I have to worry about. It's one less thing I have to do. It's not a selfish thing, but it's also like, it's going to help me out, and it's going to advance your career and skill set as well.
What I'm trying to get at is, because I want you to watch your wording, because I think if you make a minor shift in the way that you say what you're talking about, it will help people understand when you press them on learning what it is that you're trying to educate them on. Is that it's not just because you want your job to be easier. Like, it definitely does that. There's, one of the things about, one of the general rules in hiring people is you always want to hire somebody that's smarter than you, because they're going to pick up and they're going to be able to do as much. You actually becoming replaceable is an asset to most organizations, and it also makes your life, in fact, easier, because if you want to go on vacation, you're not the one person that can do whatever it is that you do, right? See, but I don't think you actually care about easy. I think you like doing things the hard way sometimes, if not a lot of the time. So you are, I would say that it makes your role as CVT and triage, or technician communicating triage, and working through everything that's here, especially with a limited number of people, it makes you more efficient.
Yes.
And why is being efficient important?
Why is being efficient important?
Yeah.
It helps patients. Well, one, helps patients. Oh, my foot's stuck. Sorry.
The dang chair is getting in our way.
It helps patients get the care that they need instead of.
Right.
It's all about the patient. So it helps the patients get the care that they need instead of having one person that can do it. You have 5 other people that can do it.
And in talking about wanting to have patients get the care that they need, why is that? Why? Like, why does that matter? You know what I mean? And what I'm alluding to is you act in a very purposeful manner. Mm-hmm. And the more that, this is what we were talking about too with the last one with Caroline, is the more that you can abstract the concept of serve the patient onto any one given task, protocol, process, whatever, the easier it is to get people to engage with it more effectively. Because I'm not just performing a task because Molly wants her job to be easier. It's like, well, no, like the more that you do this, the better we as a group serve the patient. And that's why we're here. We're here to serve. So the more that you can basically draw the line between where we're at and how that matters within serve the patient. That's actually probably been one of the things that I think we've struggled with, and I'm from a distance, so I don't have an absolute on this. But I was talking to Katie about it when you guys did the last Humane Society training. It was like, how far away are we between what Humane Society protocol is and serve the patient? How quickly can people draw that line? Because like for you and Katie, it's a given. Like it's just a part of the way that you think, and you know how to get there, even if you can't communicate it. You see it, you're more engaged with it, that sort of stuff. But those people, especially somebody that's brand new, they're here week 3, and they're just like, how many steps are in this process? And wait, what? Why does this matter? Why do I care about this? So the more that you can communicate that, I think the better that it is. And then on the other side is what's in it for them too, right? And that's not necessarily your job, but for Hannah is probably a good example, right? So like, yes, on one side, her learning different things, in terms of being able to help communicate with caregivers and understanding, how to answer their questions, that sort of stuff. The more effective she is at serving the patient in the moment, but also the more likely it is that there's going to be a return on investment for her later in life when she has to take the VT&E and doesn't fail miserably, right? Mm-hmm. So I would just say that if I were to give you a to-do, it's to that's what Riolo does best, is he abstracts purpose onto every single thing that we do. So I knew I was going to get out of here with having to tell you to do something different today in a positive way, but does that kind of make sense? Like, I'm definitely long-winded right now, but I'm definitely working through a thought, and I'm close. What are your thoughts on everything that I just threw at you? Give me something, Molly. Give me something. We can do it. Does it make sense?
It makes sense. It makes sense. If you can keep up with that 5-minute lecture you just got.
Then recite it back to me. Like, what did I just say? Because to some people, I am super long-winded and probably really irritating, so I'm sorry for everyone that's listening to this that is like that. But, like, give me the high D version of what I just said.
It comes down to serving the patient is basically you have a patient that comes in that's sick. Caregivers bring that patient in, and they don't know why their dog's sick. They want their dog, cat, bird, whatever the patient is. They want to know what's wrong with it, and they want it to be better. Whether it doesn't matter how we get there, we just need to get there.
Okay.
It's kind of the gist of what you said a little bit.
So my focus is more between the people that work here. And being able to communicate amongst ourselves in as effective of a way as possible. And I think the context of Humane Society and shelter protocol is probably one that would maybe a easier way of describing it, because the less separated that is from purpose, the better. So take let
me put my Humane Society hat on.
Put your Humane Society hat, yes.
Okay.
If you were to take I don't know if it still exists. I haven't been CSS for a while, but prepaid rabies protocol, and I'm pretty sure it's still a thing.
It is.
Like, how does that matter within serve the patient?
So
it's hard, right?
Let's do the post-adoption rabies, because the prepaid rabies we don't see that often.
Sure.
So post-adoption rabies, I'll break this down as quick as I can. Yep. Post-adoption rabies, cat, dog that's at HSMC that is younger than 12 weeks of age, that is adopted, either spayed or neutered already, but cannot receive that rabies vaccine. Mm-hmm. They need one, but they're still too far away. We've actually created this protocol that allows the caregivers to take their cat, dog, whatever it is, home with that. And then they come once when they hit whatever age it is, that 12-week mark, they basically bring in a document now that says, hey, I was adopted from here. This is my date of birth. I need my rabies vaccine. So it's basically breaks it down so where we can have the patient go to that home that they need to be in. They get the care that they need. And then they come back and then get that rabies vaccine, which then allows them to, as Katie and I call it, you're now legal. It's a joke we make at the Humane Society for vaccinating dogs or cats. It's just the easiest way to explain Humane Society post-adoption rabies protocol. It's all written down in a book. It's about a page and a half long.
It's a long one.
It's a long one, but it allows us to be able to get the patient out of the Humane Society, get them home, but still give them the care that they need, and at least still come into a vet clinic.
Right, and that's really what you're getting at. Is that process, even though it is within the adoptive process, like ideally they are adopted out, vaccinated and legal and whatever, but sometimes for the sake of the patient and their quality of life, you got to make exceptions and you got to figure out protocols around that, right?
Yep, and even with that being said, it's even space inside of the Humane Society.
Right.
Come summertime, you get puppies and kittens galore, and they just don't have the space. So being able to take that cat or dog and, as you said, move them to their house, get them going on their lives, getting their quality of life better. And then that also makes room for them to get other patients in so they can care for those patients and they can get them healthy and then find them homes.
So now the next time that you explain the post-adoption rabies process to somebody, it's not just because we have to administer as many rabies vaccines as possible. It's not about numbers. It's not about convenience for the Humane Society. It's about making sure that system of the Humane Society is able to function as well as possible, and we're also able to get patients into homes where they can have an increased quality of life.
Yes.
You're keeping that cycle rolling, all because of why? Serve the patient.
It's
better for the patient.
Yep.
Like, we fit process to serve the patient, and not just around convenience or us wanting our jobs to be easier. That process makes our jobs harder. And that's why I think sometimes in terms of consistency and implementation, it's harder for people to like commit their head to doing it the same way every time, or breaking out the book and being like, you know what, I have to do this right down to the T. Otherwise, like, something's going to go wrong and it's just going to be a huge headache for somebody down the road. Like Molly.
It's conveniently me.
Right. So the more that's that process of abstraction from getting to process to serve the patient. And I think if you're able to not necessarily, just exclusively communicate it, but start to think a little bit further what that's taking you from is, I think you are, and I shouldn't have exited out of the window, but I'm pretty sure you lean a little bit more on practical thinking than systems judgment. Not that you have a blind spot on either one, but it's just a little bit heavier in black and white. The more that you can kind of flex the muscle of that systems judgment, especially in communication, I think the easier it is for people to see where it is that you're coming from, because you're coming from a place of a motivational perspective of not necessarily sharing a high economic motivator with anybody else that's here besides like a few of us. There's actually a very limited, most of us are altruistic. And when you have somebody that's highly economically motivated, you're going to sound different than for someone that's economically motivated versus somebody that is altruistically motivated. But the closer that you can draw the line between process and purpose, the easier it is.
Yep.
And you also work your ass off, so that helps a lot too.
Yep, Humane Society was the easiest way how to possibly break that down.
Yeah, and like as much as we started talking about like what your job is as a technician and the technical aspects of that, and what where you like to focus your time. A part of it too is, that is, I love having kind of lessons or things to work on, that sort of stuff. And I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but I think that's a pretty good one, especially for yourself, because of the fact that you are, we talked about it last time, significantly different from most everybody else that works here. The more that you can bring value into that conversation, the easier it is, or I should say the more effective it is. It's not always about ease, because you're not always an easy person to work with.
That's a bit rude. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a dream.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. But it makes it more effective to work with you when there's that shared purpose, right? That's what we're all getting at.
Yep.
So I'm going to shut up for a second, and I'm going to let you go because my voice is starting to hurt. What else do you want to talk about, Molly? We got 20 minutes.
We got 20 minutes
Something
left.
like that, yeah.
Yeah, give or take
I
a
mean,
little bit.
we can pause there if you want. But yeah, I mean, does that kind of make sense? What are your thoughts on all that?
It all makes sense. It's very hard to actually verbalize why we serve the patient. Now that I'm like sitting down, like I know why I serve the patient. I enjoy making sure the patients, whether it's surgery or they come in for vomiting, diarrhea, it's so easy in my brain to be like, you need the care that you need so you're healthy and that your caregivers understand what's going on with your body and they know how to care for you and they're educated about this disease that you have. In my brain, it's so easy to like break it down, but try and actually communicate that out. Never really had to do it to an outside party because everyone that's here is here to serve the patient, whether they start day one or they're at
5 years deep,
or however long Trevor has been here. He came with Paw.
He was a part of the acquisition.
Yes, he came with the company. But we're all here for the same reason and to make sure those patients get the care. I bet maybe besides asking Riolo or Katie or Annie trying to get someone to voice that, you're going to get a different answer from everyone, and it's going to be like, I don't know how to actually voice this, but I know why I'm here.
Yeah, and so with going off of the stuff that Carlo did yesterday, and that's really where I want to push the podcast is. What that does is it makes collaboration easier.
Yep.
That's all we're trying to do. Like, I think that we have detailed out and we understand accountability so damn well that it's not that we don't have to talk about it anymore. Creating in the moment accountability and pushing our team in that direction is something that is going to be an endless fight. Like we always have to know that. However, there's so many people that work here, that listen to the podcast, that understand the concept of accountability and how to do it well and why it matters. And the fact that, one of the things that I have on a list of podcasts to do, which maybe it'll be your and my next one, is how culturally, we've redefined poorly accountability as resentment, and that's absolutely not what it is. Accountability is a process to get to solutions, to get to implementation, not just holding stuff over people's heads. And we do that really, really well. But now it's about, okay, well, how do we now collaborate? That's the whole purpose of the core value shift. It's we really have to focus on how we do that well. So if folks that work here that listen to this, right, like, how does Molly collaborate better? Well, you start to draw the line closer to shared purpose. For some people, it might be a little bit different. For Carlo, it might be a little bit more concise. I don't really know.
I do not try to step into that route very much. Like, I can have conversations with him, and we can talk about anything that's going on in the clinic. And if there's a problem, we can work it out. We can think of different ideas. We can spitball. We can have that collaboration. And there are times though I try to draw the line because I'm amazed by what can come, like what his brain can do and what he's built within the company. And like you said, accountability at one point, like, and even now still sometimes there is that resentment. Like, you try to have an accountable moment with somebody and it comes across as you're just attacking me. Which isn't what's going on. It's trying to be like, no, like, unfortunately, like, this was messed up, but let's talk about it so it doesn't happen again and we can all learn from it. Being held accountable. I honestly used to hate it. I hated it. And Katie knows this. When she would come into the clinic, I would make sure I had all my stuff on my overnights, try to have all my ducks in a row. I was like, Katie's coming in. I want to have my shit correct. And I think I did so well. And then I would be driving home and Katie would call me and it's like, hey, you messed this up. And I used to hate it because it's like, oh my God, Katie hates me. She just keeps yelling at me. And at the time it was like, it's not yelling anymore, but it's like, now that I look back on it, it's like, no, she wasn't doing it because I was doing something wrong. She was doing it because I was doing something wrong, but she also wanted to make me a better CVT and understand the process and having that accountability. At times, I resented it to her, but now it's like, she says something to me and it's like, yep, you're right. I apologize. I effed that one up. It won't happen again.
Right. And that's that collaborative. That's the reason for the focus on collaboration, is because we're all going to communicate in different ways, and we have to both understand and appreciate the way in which we communicate, but also the way that things are being received, and be conscious of that. And sometimes you have to ebb and flow some ways or others. Yep. And for yourself, there are days that the high D comes down a little bit.
I mean, Tiffany definitely caught the blunt of a high D personality day, and it came down to like that D personality just came out really, really strong at her. There was a swear word in it, and then when everything kind of came back around, it was, I apologize for that.
Right.
Like it was like at the time it was needed to be said, and the way it came out was.
Rough.
It was rough. I saw the look on her face, and then it was come back around and follow up with her. And it was like, I apologize for how that came out. Like it was not meant to come out that way, but it was rough.
Right. And that's a part of actually the Dichotomy of Leadership is a book that's over on that bookshelf, which that is the balance. It's the balance between of that collaboration and accountability, because we're all going to communicate in certain ways. Like I know that I irritate the snot out of some people when I go on 5-minute rants. So
we apologize to anyone watching this.
Exactly. But sometimes that's the way that I have to do it, because I just have to get it out. I just that's the only way that I can collaborate on or communicate at this point. And sometimes especially if I know what I'm talking about, but I just sense in the room that I'm getting long-winded, it becomes about being more concise and being able to adapt to that, because typically if I'm saying something with a purpose within the group, and that's ultimately why I want to engage that and be better at it. So as I'm now I think I might have to have you take this one out, because I could continue, but yeah, I mean, I gave you a to-do. That feels good.
I feel like I have multiple to-dos out of this conversation.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, let me just add that to my list of other things.
But it just colors all of the things that you have to do.
It does.
It's just, that's my favorite part about collaboration, is it's a part of everything.
It is.
The better that we can do it, the more effectively we can serve the patient.
God, I could have hours-long conversations of how we collaborate, and that's all we do in this clinic, whether it's talking with Katie, talking with Carlo, talking with Annie, or we were collaborating about a case of Heather cases, as we call them.
That's totally going to be a podcast. It's like how one person has absorbed all of the extremely unique cases in the last 5 years of Paw Health.
And we call them Heather cases. And poor Heather never understands why these things come on. Rhiannon's actually caught some of them now, too. We're like, congratulations, you're seeing a Heather case.
Yes.
But it just breaks it down to even how, as a technician here, how we go to school. We don't even have near the same schooling that the doctors do, but we go to school. But it also allows us to be able to collaborate with that doctor on shift. What's going on with this patient? We've done this and this. Well, have we done that?
Yep.
What about if we tried this? Can we do this? It allows us to collaborate on patient care to help figure out what's going on with that patient, especially when you have your Heather cases come in.
And talk about an item that shows the value of that toppled hierarchy, right?
Yes.
That concept, I know that is an idea that we take for granted so much around here. So for anyone that's listening, I know we talked about it long ago in the first 6 episodes, but there's no hierarchy from doctor to technician to unlicensed to reception. It's everyone's on the same level. There have been times where I have questioned doctors about what's happening. Maybe not medically, but process wise or something like that. And never has that been met. Well, there was one time that I overstepped and Trevor called me on my shit about triage. And I got put in my place a little bit, which it wasn't so much that was hey, you don't work back here. It's no, this is why this is happening. And it was an extremely positive communication But he was really assertive about it. I think Rhiannon did it to me once as well, like super early on, which made me feel really good about her role because it was like within the first 3 months, and I was like, oh, you get it. That's awesome.
You get it.
And you just told me why it mattered. You didn't just tell me to go away. And that's been every communication that I've had with collaborating with our staff. And the better, at this point, it's just about improving on that. Now that we all know we're on the same level, now how do we start to maximize that? That to me is kind of the goal.
I mean, that's what's nice, like being able to come into work. And it's funny, I'm part of multiple Facebook groups of vet techs, and just watching the stuff that they post and being like, oh my God, you actually, like, there is that hierarchy. Yeah. Where it's like the doctor, and they just throw their weight around. Like, I'm the doctor. Like, yep, we know you're the doctor. It's your license, but at the same time, it's like, I have a license too, which I know very well can get taken away. I've learned that twice now.
Well, it didn't get taken away. You just had to express the process.
Yes, it did not get taken away. I did have to go to the state for review, but like watching some of the stuff they post, it's like, oh, like you've talked about before, the unicorn clinic. Yep. It's like, my doctor cleaned the surgery suite today, and it's like, one time?
Right. Once
I've watched my doctor.
Today they did.
Today they did. Like, they've done it twice or whatever. But like watching some of the stuff they post, there is that hierarchy, and to know that that's something we actually don't have to deal with is fantastic.
Absolutely. I think that's a good pause point. Because I think we left ourselves off with a potential topic of, I want to know about the board complaints that you had to go through and what that was like for you.
We can talk about those.
Thankfully resulted in nothing negative to my knowledge, but we'll talk about that, and maybe we'll talk about some Heather cases and the Bernie that one time that year ago. That was the most unique case.
Oh my
ever.
God!
Maybe we'll have to share a case.
Case
story.
Yep, there is that one case. And we also left off. We can talk about accountability, because I have been through a couple after actions and a different actually quite a few accountable.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Situations. So.
I think I gotta get set up for the next thing. So all right. Well, thanks for tuning in, you guys. I hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next week.